This is the airplane's most mysterious component, the black box. Few people know it's actually painted red, but it contains the darkest moments from inside the aircraft. When it's recovered like this, it means disaster has struck, and all remaining questions must be answered through it. This black box was recovered from a flight traveling from Dubai to Paris. 2 days ago, the plane tragically crashed in the Alps. All 300 passengers and 16 crew members were killed, and not a single distress signal was sent. The cause of the crash remains a complete mystery. To investigate the tragedy, the Aviation Accident Investigation Bureau launched an immediate operation. They first dismantled the pressure-resistant outer shell of the black box, then removed the internal high-temperature, impact-resistant materials, exposing the water-resistant inner layer. Once that layer was peeled away, they finally retrieved the memory chip inside. Loke, the lead audio analysis expert, was working relentlessly to uncover clues from the recording. But just as everyone anticipated the truth would come to light, Loke mysteriously disappeared. In the urgent chaos, his assistant, Matthew, was called in to take over the task. Not only did Matthew possess exceptional hearing, but he also had a nearly obsessive drive to uncover the truth. Using the audio recording, he was able to almost perfectly reconstruct what happened in the cockpit during the crash. At first, the captain adjusted the aircraft to 380 feet as instructed. A flight attendant then entered the cockpit to deliver a meal. Everything seemed normal, but as soon as the attendant left, static began to interfere with communications. The pilot's headphones were filled with harsh noise, and unable to tolerate it, he removed them. Soon after, the attendant re-entered the cockpit, right as the aircraft suddenly began to descend. Meanwhile, air traffic control's calls went unanswered. All that remained in the cockpit was the harrowing sound of someone crying out for help. Despite everything appearing normal, Matthew's sharp hearing picked up something strange. He increased the frequency of the final audio segment, filtered out the background noise, and asked his colleagues to remain silent. That's when he finally caught a faint, almost inaudible sound. Matthew immediately reported his findings to leadership. He speculated that someone had broken into the cockpit and that this individual was a religious extremist. He believed this could very well have been a terrorist attack. At a press conference, Matthew laid out his analysis in detail. He had captured the flight attendant's voice asking for access to the cockpit. Moments later, after the door was open, he heard a second set of urgent, fast-paced footsteps, clearly not the attendant's. He concluded that someone had forced their way inside. He also remembered hearing the restroom door near the cockpit opening just seconds before, which suggested the intruder had been hiding there, waiting for the right moment. Later, investigators discovered that one passenger on the manifest was a known religious follower with suspected ties to an extremist group, which largely confirmed Matthew's theory. Just as the Aviation Bureau was about to close the case, Matthew received an unexpected phone call. The caller provided a key piece of information. One of the victims had left a voicemail for her husband just before the crash. But when Matthew got his hands on the audio, he was stunned. The voicemail was timestamped at 7:56 a.m., 3 minutes after the recorded time of the crash, 7:53 a.m. This meant the message was sent 3 minutes after the plane hit the mountain, which seemed impossible. Baffled, Matthew returned to headquarters. His superior explained that discrepancies in radar time were common due to network delays, with the industry accepting up to an 8-minute variance. But Matthew raised another point. In the voicemail, he heard the sounds of chaos, the cockpit door opening, and even part of a flight announcement. But none of this was in the cockpit audio from the black box. And within the announcement, he thought he heard the captain issue an emergency landing order, something only issued during mechanical failure. His supervisor listened as well, but could only make out the word emergency. The phrase emergency landing wasn't clear. Besides, with the official investigation already concluded, the supervisor didn't want to stir up further controversy. He urged Matthew to finish the report quickly. But Matthew, driven by his relentless pursuit of the truth, couldn't let it go. He went alone to the warehouse where the wreckage was stored. By comparing passengers' social media photos, he was able to identify the suspect. With headphones on, listening to the black box audio, Matthew mentally reconstructed the entire incident. He theorized that the suspect had indeed tried to reach the front of the aircraft, only to be blocked by a meal cart. He reported this to his supervisor, who dismissed it as overthinking. A food cart, he argued, wouldn't stop a determined terrorist. The response left Matthew feeling helpless and frustrated, reminding him of Loke's disappearance. Although police had been involved in Loke's case, he had vanished without a trace. Through coworkers who had worked late with Loke the night he disappeared, Matthew learned Loke had stayed alone in the office deep into the night. Suspecting that Loke might have uncovered a secret before vanishing, Matthew secretly broke into Loke's office. There, he found an email pointing to a mysterious address and a sticky note with a password. Matthew drove to the address. After getting no response at the door, he scaled the wall and entered. It was indeed Loke's private residence. Using the password, he accessed Loke's computer, only to find all files wiped. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed a parked car in the garage and retrieved the dashcam's memory card. From it, Matthew discovered that the last person Loke had secretly met with was Jack, an executive at Pegasus Tech, the company responsible for the plane's intelligence systems. Digging further, Matthew found that within just 6 months of release, the Adrian 800 passenger jet had already experienced 3 incidents tied to anomalies in the anti-stall system. This system was designed to automatically lower the nose of the plane when the rear angle became too steep. But according to one pilot, the system was still underdeveloped and, when triggered in error, would fight the pilot for control, potentially increasing the risk of a crash. Matthew realized this could have been the real cause of the disaster. Adrian had rushed the 800 model to market before the system was ready. The pilot hinted that Adrian's executives had connections with the certification board, which may have explained how they passed safety checks. This brought Matthew's thoughts to his wife, who happened to be a member of that very board, and who had recently taken a major role at Adrian. He began to suspect she might be involved and questioned her. She firmly insisted that all certifications were by the book, but since the report was classified, she couldn't share any details. Frustrated, Matthew waited until she was asleep, used her computer to access Adrian's internal network, and retrieved the 800 model's test flight report. It confirmed the anti-stall system did indeed have response delays. With this report in hand, Matthew convinced his superiors to reopen the investigation. But the leak cost his wife her job, and they had a heated argument. Despite everything, Matthew believed that uncovering the truth for the 300 victims' families was more important. After the fallout with his wife, Matthew threw himself into simulation testing of the 800 systems. But no matter what he tried, the anti-stall system always appeared to function normally. He hit rock bottom, his wife had lost her job, and he was reassigned from the investigation team, spending his days moping around at home. One day, while on a call, a sudden burst of static interrupted the line, and his nephew's drone suddenly veered out of control. It turned out someone had hacked into the drone's remote system as a prank, but this incident sparked a realization in Matthew. He revisited the cockpit audio and realized the static interference might not have been from natural causes. It could have been someone hacking into the plane's systems. The pieces clicked. Pegasus Tech was responsible for the Adrian aircraft's cybersecurity, and Loke had met secretly with Pegasus CEO Jack right before disappearing. Matthew confronted Jack with his suspicions. Jack claimed that the aircraft's control system and the passenger entertainment network were entirely separate, making a hack impossible. But Matthew had already done his homework. While the networks were different, both used a single optical fiber transmission system. If a hacker accessed that fiber, they could potentially infiltrate the cockpit controls. Matthew suspected Jack had Loke alter the black box recording to mislead investigators. Jack denied it and kicked him out, but Matthew stood firm. Digging deeper, he found there had been an attempted hacking incident a year prior, in which a bald man tampered with a website's engine RPM readings. Coincidentally, that same man was later hired by Pegasus, but was fired just 3 months in, then disappeared without a trace. Matthew checked the passenger list but didn't find the bald man's name. However, by combing through social media photos taken before the crash, he spotted him in the background. Since Pegasus was in charge of Adrian's cybersecurity, Matthew suspected the bald man had returned to take revenge. Yet his theory was dismissed, and he was officially fired. As he packed his things, he found a new file had mysteriously appeared on his computer. Last modified the same night Loke disappeared. Only 2 people had access to that machine, Matthew himself and Loke. Matthew analyzed the file and found that Loke had secretly left him a string of numbers. He plugged them into his car's GPS and discovered they pointed to a location right near a small lake by Loke's rural home.